Vocals are arguably the most important part of the mix, but they're also one of the trickiest things to get right. When you do get it right, it'll enhance the emotion of the vocal, making the listener not only hear the words, but feel them as well. Get it wrong, and the listener will disengage with the singer in the song. And that's the last thing you want. So in this video, I'll be showing you exactly how I mix the vocal for the song Medicine by indie folk singer Alexandra Grace. Let's hop into Pro Tools and check it out. So let's start by taking a quick listen to the finished vocal sound.
I drink in those healing eyes of honey and green tea. They seep their way through all the scars and bruises left on me.
Great, so now you know what we're going for. So the very first thing I did was split the lead vocal up onto two tracks, one for the verse and one for the chorus. And the idea here is that I wanted to apply different settings to the verse and the chorus. So it just makes that a lot easier to do, whether it be different processing or different effects, or even just different levels. By splitting it up, you can just set them differently without having to deal with a ton of automation. But with that out of the way, let's take a look at our processing. I'm just going to go ahead and bypass all of our plugins and our effects. So this was the totally raw vocal.
I drink in those healing eyes of honey and green tea.
Okay, cool. And I'm going to throw our effects on right now. I'll talk about them after the rest of our processing, but usually when I'm mixing, I will throw on some kind of reverb or delay onto the vocal before I start doing a lot of processing. It just makes your EQ and your compression decisions a little bit easier when you're already hearing it with the effects, especially for this track because she wanted a lot of reverb. She was very influenced by bands like the Lumineers, for instance. So I want to make sure that we've got some of that vibe going while we're EQing and compressing. So let's bring up our first plugin. We have Moosey from Klanghelm. And we're using the Mark 1 setting here, so this is basically a Fairchild emulation. We'll see how much compression we're doing in just a second here, but the idea of this first compressor is doing a tiny bit of leveling, just grabbing the loudest parts and bringing them down just a little bit, but it's really about adding character. So let's take a listen to that.
I drink in those healing eyes of honey and green tea.
So yeah, just doing a little bit of leveling there, just a few decibels of compression, at least in this first verse. It's probably hitting a little bit harder in the chorus. Let's just check that real quick.
By the way you feed my soul, giving me back what he stole.
So yeah, maybe getting up to like 5 decibels or something on the loudest points. So again, just doing a little bit of light leveling, but mostly just trying to add some character. Let me play this one line with and without the compression.
By the way you feed my soul, by the way you feed my soul. By the way you feed my soul.
So again, obviously leveling the vocal a little bit, but also adding a lot of warmth and fullness and just smoothing out the top end just a little bit. So then we're following that up with another compressor. This time it's the CLA3A. And man, LA3A compressors are so underrated on vocals, especially for female vocals. There's just something about the way the 3A makes the vocal sit and the character it adds that works so well. So let's take a listen with that.
Like when your throat is sore, a little warmth is all you need. Like when your throat is sore, a little warmth is all you need. Like when your throat is sore, a little warmth is all you need.
So again, just barely doing any compression, but it's still adding some character. It's helping to bring the vocal forward a little bit. If this were a little bit more of an aggressive track, as in if there was a lot more going on in the instrumental of it that the vocal really had to cut through, then I would probably be hitting this compressor quite a bit harder. I probably wouldn't change much on our first one, the Fairchild, but I would definitely be driving this one harder. And I think I did on other tracks on this EP. But this being a very open and simple track, I really didn't want to get too aggressive with the compression. So next up, we added a bit of EQ. And for that, I used my beloved FabFilter Pro Q3. And let's just turn all of this off, and I'm going to bring it all back in kind of in the order I would have done it while I was actually EQing this. So first, I threw on a high-pass filter. You can see I have that set all the way up at 250 Hertz, which might sound insanely high. I mean, usually when people talk about EQing vocals, they'll high-pass at like 100 or something, or maybe even 80. So 250 might seem absolutely ridiculous. But Alexandra's voice is pretty high, and there really wasn't a whole lot going on down here. Plus, there was a bit of rumbling and some plosives and all that kind of stuff. So having this a little bit higher helped to cut that out. But again, we weren't really losing anything from the body of her voice because of the range she was singing in. So let's just check out that one move.
I drink in those healing eyes of honey and green tea. They seep their way through all the scars and bruises left on me.
Yeah, right there on Left on Me on the T. you could hear some of that low-end plosiveness come in, and that was just on a T, not even a P or a B.
Bruises left on me. Bruises left on me.
So this is just cleaning all that up and cutting just a little bit of the mud from the very bottom of her voice. So next, I want to clear up a little bit of that low mid-range mud. So I did a bit of a cut here, just below 500 hertz, about 4 decibels. Let's check that out.
I drink in those healing eyes of honey and green tea. They seep their way through all the scars and bruises left on me.
So that really helped to clear everything up, and our vocal's starting to sound pretty good. Next, I wanted to add a little bit of air on the top end. So I boosted a few decibels, looks like about 4 or so at 21K. Really, a more logical way to do this particular boost would have been a shelf. So, something more like that, for instance. It's more or less the same shape, but now we're talking about doing a 4 decibel shelf at, 6K or so, as opposed to a bell at 21K. But I'm sure when I EQ'd this, I probably had the bell starting somewhere lower and was kind of looking around for where I wanted to boost, and then just ended up way up here with ultimately more like a shelf shape. But anyway, let's take a listen to that.
I drink in those healing eyes of honey and green tea. They seep their way through all the scars and bruises left on me.
So yeah, really just bringing out that really nice top end. So those 3 moves were kind of my overall tone shaping kind of EQ. But from there, I had a few little things that I wanted to clean up. First, this top end boost brought out a little bit of sizzliness right around 8.5K. Here, listen for that.
I drink in those healing eyes, green tea.
So yeah, it's just getting a little bit sizzly there. So I did a small cut there, about 2.5 decibels, but then I used the dynamic feature in Pro Q3 to cut another 2 or 3 decibels or so when there's extra information in that range.
I drink in those healing eyes of honey and green tea.
So just helping to control that a little bit. That's probably even more prominent in the chorus. Let's take a quick look there.
By the way, feed my soul. By the way, feed my soul. By the way, feed my soul.
Yeah, you can really hear it on that line, just helping to tuck that in a little bit. Then I also felt like there was just maybe a little bit too much upper mid-range, so I did a small cut here, just a little bit less than 2 decibels at about 2.5K. And then once again, I used the dynamics feature to cut another decibel or so, just when there's extra information in that 2 to 3K range.
I am home. By the way, feed my soul.
So just a small change there, but that helps to sit the vocal a little bit more into the track. Then I've got 2 more EQ moves here, and these really kind of go together. I've got these 2 pretty narrow cuts in the low end to lower mid range, one at 280 and one at about 400 hertz. And these are both strictly dynamic. So they're only going to be cutting when there's a lot of information in those areas. So let's turn those on and see what they're doing.
I know I am home. I know I am home.
So you can hear with those off, the low end was just getting a little bit out of control, but I decided to do it as 2 separate bands instead of just one larger one, because each area is a problem when she's singing in a different range. Like on these lines, it's this 400 hertz cut that's really doing the work. Let me solo that band up so you can hear just what area I'm talking about. So on I Know and Home, right when the root of the note she's singing is right around that 400 hertz area, there's a lot of buildup there. It kind of sounds like it might be some weird room resonances building up on top of the fundamental note that she's singing. So that helps to control that by just ducking it down, looks like at most 4 decibels when she's singing those notes. But then when she goes down to the lower notes, that's where this one kicks in. Let's look at the first verse for that.
I drink in those healing eyes of honey and green tea. I drink in those healing eyes of honey and green tea.
So that's really helping to keep the low end and the low mids of our vocal very consistent throughout. So from there, we have a de-esser. I'm using FabFilter Pro DS. This is my absolute favorite de-esser in the world. It's just so easy. You basically just turn it on and you're done. But not doing anything too crazy here, just de-essing.
I drink in those healing eyes of honey. I drink in those healing eyes of honey.
Next, we have Magnetite from Black Rooster Audio. And this is a tape emulation. So again, just trying to add a little bit of color, a little bit of vibe, a little bit of saturation. Nothing heavy-handed. I mean, I wanted this vocal to still sound very natural, so I'm not like cranking this to be some crazy saturation effect or anything. Once again, I'll go to a louder section in the chorus where the difference will be more obvious.
By the way you feed my soul, giving me back what he stole. By the way you feed my soul, giving me back what he stole. By the way you feed my soul, giving me back what he stole.
Again, a small difference, but just smoothing out the top end a tiny bit, making the low end a little bit rounder, and just adding some subtle harmonics. And finally, for the processing right on our vocal track, we have L1 limiter. And this really isn't doing anything. I'm just using this to boost the level up a little bit. If you're finding this video helpful so far, consider helping out the channel by booping the like button, subscribing, or making your next gear purchase through my Sweetwater affiliate link in the description down below. All of these go a long way in helping the channel and allowing me to make more videos like this one. Anyway, back to the mixing vocals. So now let's talk about the effects. There's obviously a lot of it going on this track, and it's a very important part of the sound. So let's see what we were doing. So turning everything off, let's start by taking a look at our slap. Here we have Echo Boy, and this is probably just a modification on one of these tape echo settings. I oftentimes start with one of those, but we're on studio tape, we've got some saturation dialed in, we've got some low cut and high cut, and our delay time is 116 milliseconds. So let's see what that's doing.
I drink in those healing eyes of honey and green tea.
So that's pretty subtle, but it's just adding a tiny bit of width and a tiny bit of space around the vocal. Then let's take a look at this mono delay.
I drink in those healing eyes of honey and green tea.
And once again, we're using Echo Boy. This time we have a Memory Man setting, so much darker, and accentuating that even more with the high cut knob. And our delay time is set to just under 300 milliseconds. Let's take a listen to that again.
I drink in those healing eyes of honey and green tea.
And then after Echo Boy on the mono delay, I have a compressor, the McDSP retro compressor in this case, and I have the sidechain set to the mono Vox delay send. So that's the signal that's feeding into Echo Boy. So basically this is ducking the delay. In other words, when she sings, or at least in louder sections when she sings, this compressor will clamp down a little bit, turning the delay down a little bit to make more room for the actual vocal. And then when the vocal stops, the compressor will let go, turning the delay up to fill in the space afterwards. Then next we have our vocal double send, and that's going to this instance of Eventide micro pitch. So what this is doing is it's slightly pitch shifting the left side up just a tiny bit, in this case 9 cents, and the right side down just a tiny bit, as well as adding a slight delay to each side. Let's hear with and without it.
Giving me back what he stole.
All right, so that's really subtle on this track. Let's crank that way up so you can hear it better.
I know I am home by the way you feed my soul.
So like I said, super subtle. Honestly, could have probably done without that one, but it's just adding a little bit of thickening, a little bit of chorusing. So we'll roll with it. But now onto the reverbs. These are the main effects in this track. You can see I have two set up. I have Vox verb and mono verb. And I think I stole this from Ryan Hewitt on the Lumineers Cleopatra record, but I thought it was a cool idea that I thought would work really well with this track. So again, I have two reverbs. Both are Valhalla plate, but on different settings. One of them, this one on the left, is in mono. It's a tiny bit shorter, no pre-delay. And then here I have a stereo one with a fair bit of pre-delay, about 80 milliseconds. A little bit longer decay time, 3.7 seconds in this case. And I did use different plate modes in this, just to differentiate them a little bit more. Then on our verse and our chorus vocal track, I have different amounts of each. So you can see on the verse, I have just a little bit of the stereo reverb, as opposed to the chorus, which has a ton of that stereo reverb. But then the verse has a whole lot of the mono, while the chorus doesn't have too much of that. I still have both vocals going to both reverbs, at least a little bit, just to kind of keep them a little bit more cohesive. But now the verse is going to be much less wide since it's mostly the mono verb, and a little bit shorter since that has the shorter decay time. And then when the chorus hits, it's going to open up. It's going to the wider, longer reverb, which is just going to make the vocal sound a lot bigger and more massive and spacious, which kind of fits what's going on in the rest of the track there. So let's take a look at the transition between the verse and the chorus so you can hear that effect.
When your throat is sore, a little warmth is all you need. to be ready to sing again a happy melody. I know I am home by the way you feed my soul.
I just love the way that opens up in the chorus, and it makes the verse feel extra intimate too. Oh, and I almost forgot about our throw verb here. This is an important one. So this is sending to an instance of Valhalla Shimmer. So this is just a big, long, massive sounding reverb. I'm not actually using this as a shimmer verb. I'm pretty sure you need the feedback turned up for that. That would start bringing in higher octaves above the reverb. I'll show you what that sounds like real quick.
I drink in those healing eyes.
Really cool sound, but not what I was going for here. So just using this as a big reverb. And inserted after that, I have an EQ. I'm just cutting out all the top end and all the low end to really focus this in the mid-range. But I don't have this on all the time because that would just be really overwhelming. Even with as much reverb as we were going for with this track, having this on all the time would just be so much. So what I'm doing instead is I'm automating it on just for certain words. You can see in this first verse, the last word or the last syllable even in every phrase is what gets this reverb. So let's check that out.
Of honey and green tea, they seep their way through all the scars and bruises left on me.
And without it,
Of honey and green tea, they seep their way through all the scars and bruises left on me.
and one more time with it.
Of honey and green tea, they seep their way through all the scars and bruises left on me.
So it's really helping to fill in all that space in between the lines and let the reverb fade out in a longer, more natural kind of way. It just makes it so, in the context of the track, it doesn't feel so abrupt at the end of the lines. You don't want it so loud that you hear this massive reverb just showing up all of a sudden. You just want enough so that the vocal kind of gently fades away. Keep in mind that this is just how I mix this one particular vocal on this one particular day. Just copying these settings isn't going to work for every singer and every song. You'll need more tricks in your mixing toolkit to prepare you to take on any vocal track that comes your way, which is why you'll want to check out this playlist, full of more awesome vocal mixing tips you'll want to use in your mixes. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.